The world of media is endless. It is full of content from the present day with the internet to the 1440s with the invention of the printing press, all the way back to ancient Egypt in 3000 BC with hieroglyphics, and well before then. Although media has been around for centuries, it became more widespread in the United States in the 1700s and 1800s due to the printing presses and the uprising of newspapers. During this time, party or mercantile presses ruled the media world. These presses pumped out politically funded papers that were censored, so that the stories were made only to benefit the political party that sponsors the paper. An example of this is Benjamin Franklin's older brother, James Franklin. James founded the New England Courant in 1721. During this time, the press was regulated by the government assemblies in each state and the British Parliament. Benjamin Franklin mentioned in his autobiography, "One of the pieces in our newspaper gave offense to the assembly." Because of this offense taken, James Franklin was taken up, censored, and imprisoned for a month. After James was released, he was no longer able to publish his newspaper. The censorship in publications was around until the birth of the penny press and yellow journalism. A contributor to these was James Gordon Bennett, the founder of the New York Herald, which was one of the first successful penny papers. Daniel J. Boorstin stated in The Image, "The competitive daring of giants like James Gordon Bennett intensified the race for news and widened newspaper circulation." These publications changed the censorship that had existed in the press, altogether changing the type of news the public was receiving. With this drastic change of newspapers came the invention of the telegraph in the 1830s and a whole new form of communication, destined to be censored. This new technology was tested out in 1862 when Edwin Stanton took control over the telegraph. Stanton was the Secretary of War under Abraham Lincoln. David Minnich stated in Just the Facts, "Not only did Stanton close the doors, he rerouted the telegraphs, created a secret police force, arrested reporters, restricted press passes, and even usurped the authority of his generals." After the telegraph came the birth of a new form of media and communication, the radio. The radio became extremely popular in America in the early 1920s, and with this popularity came the need to regulate and control the airwaves. This need created the formation of the Federal Radio Commission, or FRC, in 1927. The FRC's role was to determine who was on air and what frequencies would go to each station. This can be seen as censorship because the FRC had all the power concerning the radio and what stations aired when.
As we evolved in media from the use of the radio to the viewing of televisions throughout America, the need for censorship also evolved with it, given that through television we not only hear what is being said, but also see what is going on as well. This created a whole new slew of problems, given that what we view can also differ from what we hear. This, in turn, created the Federal Communications Commission, which was built on the foundations of the Federal Radio Commission, which only censored what was being heard on the radio, but now had to combat what was not only being seen on television, but what was being said as well. This would continue throughout until the modern age, but it also had to evolve once more in the early 90s with the creation of the internet. With the creation of the internet, the FCC now had this almost Herculean problem of censoring all people who had access to the internet at any time in America.
It's a difficult question because when looking at the factors at play, when you're thinking of censorship, usually the question becomes a choice of a moral obligation versus what your life choices of, or what's going to affect like your life choices of keeping your job and having that stable income. So when you're having that debate of do you kind of become that whistleblower, it does have the strongest factor of is the moral obligation stronger than like your financial stability and credibility. It's really hard. It's crazy hard.
Okay. Well, in my opinion, I think that like news stations like CNN and Fox, the two clearly separate political parties that are like the stations, I feel like they don't follow that, and I feel like in their stories, bias can be incorporated because Fox could be telling the same exact story as CNN, but could spin it in a Republican way, and vice versa with CNN could spin it in a more liberal point of view.
I think it's on a pendulum swinging of both with WikiLeaks, of the ability to leak information or like to try to anonymously put information out there is much stronger, but I also believe that there's also this counter narrative of the fake news of everything, of even if it's on the internet and you're trying to do your best, there is still that argument of attacking the person and the source of this isn't even credible, because you can say whatever you want on the internet, so it's either going to be you're trying to use the internet to tell the truth or use the internet and basically just make everyone's interpretation of false, of like how you have like when there's like the school shootings, there's people that go on the internet and make fake news about the school shootings. I thought that was like the weirdest example you could use with using the internet to try to be righteous and spread the truth, but there are people that are going actively against it to make all interpretation of what's on the internet is not reliable.
Well, I feel like Fox, their news caters towards Republicans just because they support President Trump. That's just what I've seen, and same with CNN. They support the liberal candidates in the elections and like speak more about them and speak poorly about President Trump, whereas Fox kind of encourages his what he does in the office, and CNN kind of tells the facts, but like I said, spins it, in my opinion.
I believe it shouldn't. I know people tend to make the argument of political party is synonymous to your morals, but I don't think that should be a thing. I think that regardless of whatever your political affiliation is, especially if it's to a party, not to a person in the party, your morals should be separate of that, of what's right is what's right. That shouldn't be a Republican, Democrat, liberal, conservative thing.
Yes, I see the bias in social media when users state their political party and like in their bio, or like, say something like hashtag Trump 2020 or hashtag, whatever, you know what I mean? And then they're tweeting, their tweets, like I said, are biased towards a specific party. And they're not really educating their followers on the facts, but more so their opinion on the facts to get the followers to change their opinion about the facts.